There are three things I've learned never to discuss with people: religion, politics, and the Great Pumpkin. There is a great deal of wisdom to be learned from Charlie Brown and his friends in Peanuts. However, life isn't quite as fun if we don't play things safe. So today, we're going against the advice of the lovable Linus Van Pelt in a video essay that will likely be discussing two of these aforementioned topics, if not all three. This is not a culture war channel. At least, it doesn't try to overtly be. I made this channel because I wanted to discuss what I find interesting about stories and provide you with something stimulating for your mind every week. I believe I can do that without constantly inflaming the public and becoming a grifter like so many here on the internet. However, just because it isn't obvious doesn't mean I have never shared my political and religious worldview. That's because it is impossible to do so. There are many out there who debate just how political art should be, ranging from those who want to see more of their beliefs in the fiction they consume to those who desire art that tries to be as apolitical as possible, hearkening to the so-called fiction they grew up with. That is impossible. Art has, is, and always be political. Everything that appears in a work of art is a proclamation from the artist about their beliefs. Why is that? And why does modern art feel so different than the art of yesteryear that didn't feel so politically charged and yet absolutely is? Join us here at Mercenary Publishing for this week's essay on All Art is Political. I typically design these video essays to be enjoyed by those who like to listen to them as background noise, but it would benefit you to take a look at the screen at this point of the video. Have you seen this meme before? It is of an anime girl eating a hamburger. On its surface, it might seem impossible to ascribe any sort of political meaning to this picture, but we can actually tell a great deal about the artist if we try. Put on your deerstalker cap because we're about to do our best imitation of Sherlock Holmes, Mercenary. After studying the image for less than a minute, there are a few beliefs I can glean from this drawing that I'm certain the artist would agree with. To begin with, look at the burger and check out the ingredients inside. This burger has both a hamburger patty and bacon, which means that the artist is not a PETA extremist who despises anything to do with meat. The fact they decided to include not one, but two types of meat would suggest they have positive feelings towards meat. That continues on to what the drawing depicts. It is of a cute girl happily biting into the hamburger, bringing her the joy one can only find from such a delicious sandwich. If they were misogynistic, a woman hater, it is very unlikely they would draw such an innocent girl in such a state of bliss. The artist clearly believes that there is value in women and in children, given the youngish age of the girl being depicted, and that both women and children deserve to be happy. Finally, let us look at the appearance of the girl herself. The art style is drawn in what is colloquially referred to by the internet as an anime style. Therefore, the artist must value Eastern art, especially art produced by Japanese artists. But despite drawing in an anime-influenced style, the girl herself is rather light-skinned. Therefore, the artist likely has positive feelings towards people of that skin tone, or at the very least isn't a black supremacist. There. That concludes my analysis, and I haven't even gone into color theory, the way the background is drawn, the choice of attire, the meaning behind the heart and earring, and all the other little details that you might have gathered in your own analysis of this drawing. This is the main basis for my central argument that all art is political. Art becomes art as an artist expresses their thoughts and feelings and translates them through a canvas, be it through the means of pen and paper, physical and digital brushes, a camera, and all the other tools suited to create art. Art is art because of the deliberateness of the artist, which will always reflect both their conscious desires and subconscious beliefs when creating art. There are many ways to define politics, but I personally define the word as the worldviews which a person believes the world should be governed by. As artists infuse their worldviews into their art, it becomes more and more impossible for the artist to create something that doesn't reflect their political beliefs in one way or another. That's why you usually only have to look at a piece of art to get a good read on the artist behind it. Weird art is usually made by equally weird people. When you see fiction full of smut, you don't assume the artist is a nun, but a pervert or a sex pest. When you see fiction full of harmful stereotypes, you don't assume the artist is a genius, but a short-sighted moron who doesn't understand what the world is really like. Even though many people say art isn't political, it's pretty easy to guess at what a person is like by just chewing on the art they make. So it's pretty much impossible to make art that isn't political. You could make a comic about a square and a circle talking to each other, and that comic would still be political because of the choice language you use for the conversation. But if art has always been political, why is it only now that it seems to be such a problem? Why do so many people decry the modern infusion of politics into art when it has always been there beneath the surface? Well, that's just it. It has always been there beneath the surface, but it's only in recent years in which politics has already crept up to the forefront of the art. While it is impossible to objectively measure any piece of art, there are some general guidelines which artists would benefit from adhering to. So let's transition into the next chapter of this essay by discussing the subtlety of art. William Shakespeare is regarded by many throughout history as one of the greatest playwrights of all time. But did you know that Shakespeare was also one of the most prominent political artists as well? Many of Shakespeare's plays are based on historical events, so it is to be expected that they serve as a commentary on the politics of English society. However, even in his lighter and more fiction-based plays, did Shakespeare explore the prominent issues that interested society, his audience at large. The role of religion, the fluidity of gender and sexuality, the role of the state and dangers of tyrants, the issue of finding truth in an increasingly confusing and corrupt world, the struggles of the lower class trying to make do in societies ruled by the elite few. These are the topics discussed by many works of modern art, and yet they were also the topics analyzed by William Shakespeare in his plays, sonnets, and poems. There is basically no topic featured in modern fiction that hasn't been touched upon by the works of the great bard. If you haven't figured it out already, William Shakespeare remains the most beloved playwright to have ever lived, in large part because the themes at the heart of his plays will always remain relevant, even when presented to an audience 400 years after he died. Though he might have written his works for the audience of his day, his masterpieces continue to impress the audiences of our day for this reason. But separates the works of Shakespeare and many of the works of art of old from the cringy art of the modern day is the appreciation for the subtle. While you will always find exceptions to the rule, and subtleness should be viewed on a spectrum, the fact is that the vast majority of art produced in yesterday is practically invisible to the loud, bombastic, and nakedly unsophisticated art of today. This is in large part by necessity. The freedom of speech which artists not only enjoy but tend to abuse in modern democratic societies was a privilege that artists of old could only dream of. Therefore, if they wish to express their political criticisms and not get arrested by the state for it, artists would have to employ subtlety in order to maintain a level of plausible deniability should the soldiers working for the king or queen come knocking at their door in the middle of the night. Dante's Inferno, Paradise Lost, Gulliver's Travels, Don Quixote, The Fairy Queen. These are some of the most famous stories ever written, and yet each of them are heavily infused with politics that goes over the head of the modern reader because they aren't aware of the historical background during which each of these stories were written. However, don't feel too bad, because many of the people who enjoyed these stories as they came out missed out on the political undertones as well. While competition makes things difficult in modern society for the average artist to succeed, it was even harder for artists in the past to make a reliable living off of their work. Only the very best could make a salvageable living, and that was while dealing with authoritative governments just looking for a reason to throw any potential critic of the ruling powers into the deepest and darkest dungeons reserved for those who challenged political authority. According to the Movie Business Book, this conversation once took place between Orson Welles and Henry Jaglom. The enemy of art is the absence of limitations. Economically and creatively, that's the most important advice you can be given. You have limitations. You don't have $1 million to blow up that bridge, so you have to create something else on film to produce the same effect. Instead of having money to hire hundreds of extras, you have to sneak a cameraman in a wheelchair through the streets of New York City and steal the shot, which gives you a look of much greater reality. Choice paralysis is becoming an increasingly difficult problem for many people in modern society, and that is equally true for artists. Given an artist the entire universe to work with, and they'll often struggle to figure out where they need to start. Given an artist a beach to work with, and they'll figure out something to do ere long. But give an artist a sandbox to work with, and they'll hardly waste any time before they start making castles. Constraints, restrictions, limitations are the true basis by which any good art is to be made. I've often found it surprising that many artists struggle to produce more art once they find success. You would think that having money and fame would give them the means to spend more time creating even better art, but the opposite often happens, because their options in life gives them an excuse to do anything other than work on their art. I can guarantee that A Song of Ice and Fire would absolutely be done by now if the Game of Thrones TV show didn't blow up as it did. Alternatively, we would have likely gotten much more from Tolkien in terms of writing fiction if The Lord of the Rings didn't come out and instantly change the world of fantasy literature. The restrictive nature of past societies, limiting what an artist could or could not say, forced them to get creative. It forced them to deconstruct their ideas and beliefs, grounding them into a paste until it was reduced to a base, raw substance that is at the core of all amazing art. While there are many benefits to living in societies with increased freedom of speech, the degradation of the quality of art has been an unexpected casualty of modern society. This is what the audience is truly saying when they complain about art being political. It's not so much that art is suddenly political, but more that all the subtlety of political art has been stripped and laid bare. We appreciate women who wear alluring dresses to parties, but arrest those that show up naked. We appreciate men who are muscular and strong, but tell them they're gross and stupid when they start flexing and showing off their biceps. We used to appreciate politicians who could deliver messages that seemed to unite the nation even as they espoused their party's political ideals, while rejecting the politicians who brought division through the use of hateful words and slurs. But Donald Trump flipped that on its head. And the reason why Donald Trump could not only get away with the things he says, but even win the US presidential election twice because of it, is actually partially the fault of modern art. Many voters who supported not only him, but other overly conservative politicians throughout the world in places like Argentina, Italy, and Japan, have done so in part because they feel personally attacked and targeted by the art that they consume. Whereas the movie theater, the TV, the book, and other forms of entertainment were once a safe space the whole family can enjoy, the lack of subtlety in art has caused more conservative individuals to reach out to those who proclaim the loudest that they'll make art great again. If you're wondering why there are so many popular culture warriors out there now, this is why. Where the line is crossed from person to person will obviously vary from person to person, and it is not my place to tell you where that line is or should be. What is objectively true is that the subtle has become unsubtle with time. Characters once implied to be homosexual have since become characters who are openly stated to be homosexual, have since become characters who physically demonstrate they are homosexual in fiction. Characters who once served the central power authority since became characters who would critique yet obey the central power authority, since became characters who are heroes because they are willing to take down and destroy the central power authority. Characters were once seen as the ideal because they were emotionally stoic and so something the audience could aspire to, since became characters who were seen as the ideal because they would occasionally show their secret sides that would challenge the audience's perception of themselves, since became characters who are seen as the ideal because they are hot messes the audience could relate to. Art has changed. I think art has changed for the better, because I think diversity is the spice of life, and am pleasantly surprised by art that comes from those who I would likely fundamentally disagree with or even dislike if I ever met them in person. However, there is certainly art that I think crosses the line in the ways certain topics are depicted, but such has always been the challenge of art, because, at its very core, there is a fundamentally liberal, even progressive side to all art, even art produced by the most right-wing and conservative among us. I should know, because I consider myself an artist whose writings will be hard to define when placed upon the political spectrum. Roll the ad, Master Kolob.
Hey there, mercenary. Are you enjoying the great content produced by that dumbass Anthony? The best way to support the channel is by checking out our book series, The Mercenary Saga, a stylish character action story featuring vampire mercenaries working as they fight the forces of evil in this genre-blending tale. For this video, I want to promote The Mercenaries' Crusade, a high fantasy novel inspired by Dark Souls, Fire Emblem, Berserk, and other fantasy stories. The evil man-devil Moncad has conquered Anorda and plagues the land with the miasma of deathless death. No one can die, but no one can grow. No one can have children. No one can have a purpose in a world that has lost all meaning. This cannot stand. And to fix the world, Heaven deploys the vampire warrior, Sky Crystal. To save the world, she'll have to bring death back to its cursed lands, all while trying to outrun the Grim Reaper chasing her. Can she do it? Can she save Anorda in the year of life she has left? Support the channel and enjoy the story of The Mercenary Saga. Back to the essay, Anthony.
There are several ways to approach this idea that art is inherently liberal. We'll start with the shorter topic of conversation, which is the economic realities of art. To try and pursue a career making money off of art is a highly risky endeavor. Behind every successful actor is 1,000 failures who did not make it onto the stage. And behind every painter are 10,000 talented people who, for whatever reason, society has rejected. Statistically speaking, your odds of finding mainstream commercial success as an artist aren't going to be that much better than winning a lottery. The conservative mindset is founded off of seeking stability. The term conservative comes from the word conserve, which in itself means to protect, to maintain, to keep safe and sound. Few conservatives venture into the arts, not because they have no interest in them. After all, studies have found that certain genres of fiction, such as action and adventure, actually attract more conservative than liberal audiences. No, conservatives by and large do not reject artist, but reject the gamble that is to try and become a career artist. The willingness to potentially throw one's life away, living on the edges and fringes of society, is a mindset that the left-leaning liberal will find far more tenable than the right-wing conservative. After all, they already espouse views in conflict with society at large. So what does it matter to them if they also pursue a life in conflict with expected societal responsibilities? That's the economic truth of why liberals tend to dominate fields connected to the arts. But it does go deeper than that, and it once again goes to the nature of society and art's role in it. This is where there is a bit of a weird mismatch between art and the two major political movements that dictate global politics. A discrepancy that also highlights while the political parties are dumb and that it's stupid to try and label anyone as being liberal or conservative. Modern left-wing liberals believe in the collective more than the individual, while right-wing conservatives believe in allowing the one to triumph over the many. However, liberals also believe that the individual should be able to defy societal norms and live as they want to, while conservatives argue that social norms are necessary to maintain society, and that we should punish those who flagrantly defy them. Ergo, both the liberal and conservative moments espouse views that are inherently at odds with their own ideologies, nearly purely individualistic or community-based. So why would I say that art is more a liberal practice than a conservative one? I suppose it has to do with attitude. Political parties try to square their circles by prioritizing certain groups and ideas over lesser ideals. According to the liberal, a shared community is great, but it should really be in service to the individual who is unrepresented, be it because they are LGBT, a racial minority, disabled, or otherwise someone of lesser privilege compared to what they have determined to be the most politically favored, the straight Christian white man. Alternatively, the conservative moment champions the individual when they find economic success or promote standard societal norms, but condemns them as said individual uses their personal rights to live a life that goes against what is expected of every member of society. Individuality is a benefit as long as it maintains the status quo, and problematic when it defies it. The thing about art, though, that makes it inherently more liberal than conservative is how it props up the individual. Modern progressive movements seek to give a voice to the voiceless, while modern conservative movements wish to suppress the voices of those who they view to be threats to society. Art inherently takes a side, and by its very nature will always be seen as a political tool of the liberal left, because of what it does and what it expects from the artist. At its core, creating and publishing art is the act of showing off one's soul to the world. The artist takes their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs, everything that makes them what they are, and sprays it across the canvas of their choice. The artist who presents art to the public is shouting with the megaphone to pay attention to them and what they have created. While art can be used to promote economic causes, the primary purpose of art is to always champion the ideals of the individual. Consequences and societal considerations be damned. Because every artist possesses views and values that do not fit with society at large, controversial works of art are in conflict with large swaths of society. But even widely beloved works of art, accepted by both sides of the aisle, will have details that not every member of the audience will agree with. Art allows the artist to share with the audience how they see the world, and by sharing it, the artist is asking the audience to change their views to match that of the artist. That is how the artist finds success, for audiences return to the artist with whom they share the most views with, especially in matters of taste. The sacrifice asked of conservative is that the individual hide the aspect of themselves that do not conform with good society, keeping it in the closest if need be. The expectation of the liberal is to let their freak flag fly, especially when it is in opposition to the old and stuffy rules of good society. Conservatives can make art, even conservative art, but by creating art, they are trying to redefine the society they live in rather than remain an unquestioning servant of the society they are purported to conserve. So art has been and always will be politically liberal. Even in the hypothetical utopia in which all people share the same political standard opinion, making the ultimate unified conservative society, it will all be disrupted the second an individual publishes art because it expresses an idea that will challenge the status quo. This is why it is no great surprise that fascistic regimes work so hard to suppress art, often targeting artists first when a totalitarian's regime takes control and begins to remove potential threats to the board. And this is also why artists have gotten so much flack lately from the mainstream population. As societies around the world have moved to the right, any and all targets that are perceived to be inherently liberal are considered to be servants of the enemy. I believe that most people share my worldview, if only on a subconscious level, that art is inherently liberal. Therefore, as the world currently does its best to suppress liberal ideology, it must also place its foot upon the neck of art, to its own destruction, because it is actually art that influences politics and not the other way around. In the world of business, there is a concept known as breaking the glass ceiling. The idea is that there is an invisible systemic barriers that primarily keep women, and now other minorities, from reaching key executive and leadership positions. Once the glass ceiling is broken, it is significantly easier for other women and minorities to achieve the positions once denied to them, thanks to the efforts of the individual who first broke through the barrier. Politics is an interesting beast in that it is the endeavor of politicians to try and represent the will of the people. While politicians absolutely manipulate the public, all politicians and people in authority still answer to the will of the people. This is true even in totalitarian regimes, because the leader of a nation must always worry about being overthrown by the same military forces they use to repress the people. But how does a politician know what causes to pursue? How does a politician identify which causes will best resonate with the general public? While think tanks invest millions of dollars into polling and focus groups, they just as often look to a different source to get a good sense of the sentiments of the general public. Art. Art is designed to constantly test the boundaries of society. Art that is rejected is art espousing taste, ideals, and beliefs that society does not accept. Art that is popular provides insight into the current ideology of society writ large, but even has the power to reshape it. Regardless of what you think of him, Andrew Breitbart was absolutely right when he promoted the Breitbart Doctrine. Politics is downstream from culture. Nobody shoves politics into art. Politics themselves are pulled from art. Here at Mercenary Publishing, we do our best to provide weekly essays that are meant to provide you something interesting to listen to, but something we hope will help you in the way you think about life. Art is good for the soul, but like anything you ingest, you should always be thinking about what exactly you are consuming. Anyone who says to get politics out of art is a fool, because there is no separating the two without destroying art and neutering what makes it so interesting. Even so, think about the ideals of the artist the next time you watch a movie, read a book, or look at a picture. Perhaps you'll understand it better when you do, and make the art all the more meaningful for it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video essay, then please be sure to subscribe or check out my book series, The Mercenary Saga. Share a comment with your thoughts on politics and art, and catch you in the next video. Mercenary.